Awesome. Well, good morning. The subcommittee will come to order, and the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Again, I want to thank our witnesses for being with us today to discuss the importance of artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, in the communications and technology sector. And just going off script a little bit, I mentioned this to some of you, no matter where you look today, there's articles about AI and how important it is and where we're going with it. So I appreciate you all being with us. But AI is more than just a thing of fiction. The uses of AI technology spans across many sectors. This technology has the potential to significantly improve the quality of our lives across a range of industries, many of which are within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to regulating this technology, nor should there be. To unlock the full potential of AI, we must establish foundational protection for the data that powers many of these new AI tools by enacting a comprehensive data privacy standard in the United States. As we integrate AI into various aspects of our lives, it is crucial to ensure that its development is guided by ethical principles and American values. In the communications sector, artificial intelligence applications are used to optimize the quality and reliability of service, fight the scourge of robocalls, detect and respond to cybersecurity incidents, and ensure a safe online experience for our kids. AI applications are used to provide faster, more reliable internet service, whether Americans are on a telehealth visit, working from home, streaming their favorite shows, or playing video games. Intelligent networks now and in the future will perform better by using large models to predict where traffic capacity will be needed and when. Network operators currently take advantage of digitized networks to more rapidly detect outages, use detailed analytics to determine the cause of the outage, and eventually get Americans back online faster. This automation takes place not only in wired networks, but also in wireless networks where AI applications are used to optimize the use of airways to provide the best user experience. For cybersecurity, some AI models utilize algorithms to detect incoming threats and learn from networks' previous behavior to establish a framework for prevention in the future. AI utilization in content moderation has become a significant factor in deterring violent content and other material that violates the rules of a platform. AI's actions are key to creating a safer and more interactive platform for our users. In the same way humans are not perfect, AI is not perfect either. Because humans design AI algorithms, AI systems may contain unintentional bias, which unfortunately could lead to discrimination. The key to ensuring the safety of algorithms used by big tech is to make sure the algorithms are trained and developed responsibly with greater transparency for the user. These are just a few of the nearly unlimited uses of AI technology. Whether you are in your home or on a busy road, AI will assist in providing a more seamless transition from one service to the next, ensuring continuous connectivity. Despite these technological advances, this new frontier doesn't come without challenges, which is why we must ensure the responsible and ethical use of AI. In today's hearing, we'll discuss some of the many use cases and benefits of AI. We will also examine why U.S. leadership on AI is imperative for economic and national security. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and I thank you for appearing before us today. And at this time, I will now yield to the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentlelady from the 7th District of California, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we're holding this hearing today. While other Energy and Commerce subcommittees have started to explain AI's implications in their jurisdictions, I think ours has some of the most pressing. AI is too far-reaching a concept to fit neatly into any one congressional committee, but it's clear that the issues we'll be discussing today are some of the most foundational. First and foremost, I think we have an obligation to ensure the United States leads the deployment of this technology on terms that are consistent with our values. To me, that means promoting innovation and competition while establishing new safety, security, and equity standards. Thankfully, the Biden administration has engaged industry to establish consensus goals and guardrails that will guide AI's deployment in the United States. President Biden's recent executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy artificial intelligence is a testament to this administration's vision. The EO ensures that America leads the way in seizing the promise and managing the risks of AI. It does so by requiring more transparency from developers of foundational models that pose a national economic or security threat, and it would also promote consumer trust by protecting from AI-enabled fraud through new authentication guidance. It would also combat AI bias by addressing algorithmic discrimination through best practices and training. President Biden's EO represents one of the most broad and consequential steps toward more responsible AI governance. I look forward to working with the administration to implement it quickly. And while it's clear we need broad horizontal rules of the road, it's also important that we explore industry-specific vertical applications. Thankfully, the communications and technology landscape provides ample opportunity. On the telecom front, Chairwoman Rosenworcel has led the charge at the FCC to capture AI's promise for more efficient and resilient communications networks. Take spectrum efficiency. As demand for our airwaves grows, we'll need to be more nimble and efficient in managing the limited resource. That's why the FCC is exploring more intelligent networks with devices that can manage their own transmissions. Taken together, these advances would mean faster and more capable networks for American consumers. But despite the progress from the administration and the FCC, it's clear that this subcommittee has a foundational role to play in AI. I'll be pushing to use our significant jurisdiction to support the responsible deployment of AI in areas like spectrum management, cybersecurity, online content, and beyond. Because the stakes here couldn't be higher, AI holds the potential to determine who gets to participate and succeed in the 21st century economy. So I'm excited about this hearing, and I appreciate our witnesses for appearing before us today. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The chair now recognizes the chair of the full committee, the gentlelady from Washington, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Good morning and welcome to our third hearing of this Energy and Commerce series on artificial intelligence. AI has the potential to usher in a new era of discovery and innovation. This technology can be used to solve problems we once thought unsolvable. It offers advancements that could empower people, expand worker productivity, create new jobs, and grow the economy. Its potential is vast, unlocking possibilities across every sector of the economy. That said, AI also raises serious concerns about how bad actors can exploit this technology and abuse it. As AI gets deployed, we must think about appropriate measures to ensure accountability. The best way to start this effort is by laying the groundwork to protect people's information with a national data privacy standard, which provides greater transparency and puts people back in control over the collection and use of their personal information. It is critical that America, not China, is the one addressing these challenges and leading to both AI's development and deployment and ensuring people's data privacy is protected. Access to the internet has become an integral part of life for many Americans. Broadband has unleashed new tools that have improved our education system, healthcare, and our ability to stay in touch with family and friends. It's strengthened our economy, empowered entrepreneurs, researchers, and allowed people to connect around the world in ways they never could before. Providers are constantly working to increase the capacity on their networks and deploy more network infrastructure. AI and machine learning can monitor networks to determine what bandwidth is available at a specific time. This could significantly improve the efficiency of our communications infrastructure without any disruption for people using the services, enhancing the user experience. AI's ability to engage in pattern recognition extends far beyond human capability, allowing for advanced detection of cybersecurity threats and malicious activity. Unfortunately, AI models can also be used to enhance hacking capabilities such as deep fake enabled phishing attacks. The best way to address this malicious use of AI may be, in fact, to leverage AI tools to detect, prevent, and respond to threats. America's networks are under constant attack from our adversaries and other bad actors. Cyber warfare is an ever-changing landscape and requires that we utilize all technologies available to protect our critical infrastructure. Also, AI can be a helpful tool to combat illegal and violent content online, like recent content posted by Hamas, which they are using to recruit, spread propaganda, potentially live stream the murder and torture of hostages, and organize more terrorist activities. That said, while this may be an efficient tool to combat illegal content, we need transparency and accountability from big tech to ensure these new tools aren't being abused to moderate content in a way that infringes on Americans' right to free speech. Protecting the innovative nature of AI while encouraging responsible development and deployment is key to unlocking the full potential. This is best done with a light-touch, market-driven approach that provides clear rules and guidance for industry. The Biden administration's recent AI executive order fell short of this objective. While I agree with the president that the best way to cementing American AI leadership is by first enacting a comprehensive data privacy and security law, I am concerned that the order itself places unnecessary and duplicative regulatory burdens that could hinder the development of this critical technology. To address the challenges of AI and take advantage of the benefits, the administration needs to work with Congress to strike the right balance between encouraging innovation and ensuring responsible development and deployment. AI and machine learning are here to stay. Its potential is both exciting and disruptive. AI could vastly enhance people's lives, especially by improving communications network performance and internet speeds. But with the benefits come risk, especially cyber risk and the abuse of people's personal data. The best way to mitigate many of these risks and cement America's leadership in AI is by enacting comprehensive data privacy and security legislation. I look forward to the discussion today and to hearing from our witnesses about the vast use cases for artificial intelligence technology in the communications and technology space. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, the committee continues exploring the potential benefits and harms of artificial intelligence by discussing how we can leverage the power of AI to basically improve communications networks. AI has the potential to transform how these networks can better serve the public. For instance, AI may be able to detect deep fake voices and scam calls, which will help to quickly protect consumers from annoying and illegal robocalls. AI models can be deployed in communications networks to help enhance resiliency and reliability so that when natural disasters hit, providers can more easily assess damage and get these crucial networks back up and running. And AI may be able to optimize government and non-governmental use of spectrum so that this limited natural resource is used more efficiently for wireless and satellite connectivity. Given the opportunities that AI offers, I'm pleased that the Biden administration has taken action to examine the possibilities and risks of this technology. Last month, President Biden signed an executive order to adopt a coordinated government-wide approach for the development and use of AI. The order directs NTIA to consider the benefits and risks of open-source AI systems. These systems can drive innovation by placing AI tools in the hands of consumers and researchers, but they're also susceptible to misuse and harm. And the administration's order also encourages the FCC to explore how AI can improve network security, resiliency, and interoperability, as well as combat unwanted robocalls and robotexts. Fortunately, the FCC has already started investigating how AI can be used to optimize communications networks, improve spectrum sharing, and developing more sophisticated models of 5G and 6G wireless signals. And tomorrow, the FCC will vote on a proposal to examine how AI technology can bolster the agency's existing efforts to protect consumers from unwanted and dangerous robocalls and robotexts. So I want to commend the Commission for exploring these issues, and I hope Congress continues to support these efforts by fully funding our federal agencies so they can advance this important work. Now, despite the promises of AI, we must also acknowledge its potential pitfalls. There's no question that this technology poses real risk to consumers, especially as it becomes more embedded in our daily lives and our communications networks. We've already seen AI technology being used to mimic the voices of family members to scam Americans out of their life savings. Bias in the data used to train AI facial recognition software can contribute to wrongful and discriminatory arrests. And chatbots have been reported to leak personal data and spread disinformation. So these risks demonstrate why it's important that Congress and regulators fully understand how AI models are being developed, trained, and operated, and only then can we ensure proper measures are in place to mitigate any harm and produce critical accountability. Now, I strongly believe that as a bedrock of any AI regulation, we must enact strong federal data privacy protections for all consumers. AI cannot function without large quantities of data, and we must ensure that this increased data demand does not come at the expense of consumers' right to privacy. Last Congress, Chair Rodgers and I worked together with our committee to advance data privacy legislation with strong provisions focused on data minimization and algorithmic accountability. As AI becomes further integrated into American life, we must protect consumers from predatory data collection, and I remain committed to work to enact strong bipartisan privacy protections. It's the only way we can limit the aggressive and abusive data collection practices of big tech and data brokers and ensure our children's sensitive information is protected online and protect against algorithmic bias and put consumers back in control of their data. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses about the challenges and opportunities of integrating AI technologies into our communications network. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and that concludes member opening statements. And at this time, we will now hear from our witnesses. And today's witnesses are Ms. Courtney Lang, Vice President of Policy, Trust, Data, and Technology at the Information Technology Industry Council, ITI. Mr. Sam Rubin, Vice President, Global Head of Operations, Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. Dr. Sami Yamani, Chief Technology Officer at Viavi Solutions. And Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee, Senior Fellow in Governance Studies and Director at the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. So thank you very much for being with us. I'd also like to note for our witnesses that the timer light that you'll see in front of you will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining, and will turn red when your time has expired. And Ms. Lang, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statements. Again, thank you for being with us.
Chairman Latta, Ranking Member Matsui, and Chairwoman McMorris Rodgers and Ranking Member Pallone, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Courtney Lang, and I'm Vice President of Policy for Trust, Data, and Technology at the Information Technology Industry Council. I lead ITI's global artificial intelligence policy advocacy work and manage ITI's cybersecurity policy work. ITI represents companies from all corners of the technology sector and across the AI ecosystem, including those involved in both developing and deploying AI models. We applaud this committee's leadership in supporting past and present legislation that focuses on U.S. leadership in developing cutting-edge AI technologies and affording opportunities for companies to pursue timely research and development-focused partnerships. Such legislation includes Chairwoman McMorris Rodgers' bipartisan American Compete Act of 2020 and Representative Eshoo and Obernolte Create AI Act, bipartisan legislation supported by many members of this committee. President Biden recently signed a long-awaited executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI, which included over 100 taskings to a variety of different agencies. Well, this was an important signal in U.S. AI policymaking. It is only one piece of the puzzle. Congress has an important role to play in encouraging future innovation and investment in the United States, protecting consumers and businesses, and mitigating foreseeable risks. I am glad to be here today to further discuss how Congress should approach a legislative framework for AI. Artificial intelligence will have a transformational impact for both telecommunications and cybersecurity. In telecommunications, AI is being used to authenticate calls, analyze voice prints, and filter or block spam callers, helping to address the prevalence of robocalls. In cybersecurity, AI is helping to detect anomalous behavior and respond to incidents more quickly, therefore reducing the ramifications of a cybersecurity incident. These use cases demonstrate how important it is that a US AI policy framework balance the need to support innovation and the need to manage risk and foster accountability. In order to create such a framework, ITI encourages US policymakers to take a holistic approach that firstly, supports innovation and investment by prioritizing investment in compute infrastructure, funding research and development activity focused on testing and evaluation for model performance, and taking steps to make data available in machine-readable formats. Second, a US AI policy framework should take a risk-based approach that appropriately considers existing legal constructs and allocates responsibilities between actors in the AI value chain based on their role and function. Concrete risks should be identified so that obligations can be appropriately targeted to high-risk use cases and innovation can continue unimpeded in low-risk settings. Existing legal frameworks, such as the Civil Rights Act or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, may already account for certain risks in specific instances. So to avoid duplicating or otherwise creating overly broad regulation, it is important to evaluate these and understand how they might apply. Third, a US AI policy framework should facilitate public trust in the technology, including by fostering transparency and considering how to employ content authentication tools. Consumer trust will increase the adoption of AI and expand the AI ecosystem in the United States. Fourth, a US AI policy framework should ensure security and privacy, which starts with comprehensive data privacy legislation, but which also includes a recognition that AI can be used to bolster cybersecurity, and that AI should be deployed with security in mind. We applaud this committee's work to advance bipartisan privacy legislation, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this. Fifth, a US AI policy framework should recognize that US leadership in AI policy is a global imperative, and it should prioritize engagement with like-minded allies overseas to advance a common vision of secure, trustworthy AI. To conclude, AI has the potential to be transformative in the communications sector, in the cybersecurity realm, as well as to society more broadly. Congress should work with stakeholders to develop an AI framework that supports innovation and manages risk, ensuring that the United States remains the leader in AI. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rubin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Chairs Rodgers and Lauda, ranking members Pallone and Matsui, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the critical role of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity defense. My name is Sam Rubin, and I'm the Vice President of Global Operations at Unit 42, which is the Threat Intelligence and Incident Response Division of Palo Alto Networks. For those not familiar with Palo Alto Networks, we're an American-headquartered cybersecurity company founded in 2005 that's since grown to protect tens of thousands of organizations around the world. We support critical infrastructure operators, the U.S. federal government, universities, and other educational institutions, and a wide range of state and local partners, and we've been using AI to do so for many years. This means that we have a deep and broad visibility into the cyber threat landscape. We're committed to using this visibility to be good cyber citizens and national security partners with the federal government. As my written testimony outlines, AI is central to realizing this commitment. We encourage all entities to embrace the importance of AI for this critical use case. Adversaries are growing increasingly sophisticated, and AI will further amplify and scale the speed of their attacks. However, this backdrop heightens the importance of maximizing the substantial benefits that AI offers for cyber defense. This technology helps network defenders anticipate, track, and block cyber attacks to a degree never seen before. Indeed, the demonstrated impact of AI-powered cyber defense is significant. By leveraging AI, each day, Palo Alto Networks detects 1.5 million unique attacks that were not present the day before. This process of continuous discovery and analysis allows threat detection to stay ahead of the adversary, blocking 8.6 billion total attacks every single day. The bottom line is that AI makes security data actionable for network defenders, giving them real-time visibility across their digital enterprises and the ability to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber attacks quickly. Palo Alto Networks firmly believes that the risky outcome for society is not leveraging AI for cyber defense purposes. My written testimony highlights a particularly compelling use case for AI-powered cyber defense that's showing notable results, up-leveling and modernizing the Security Operations Center, or the SOC, as we call it. For too long, the cyber community's most precious resources, our people, have been inundated with alerts to triage manually. This creates an inefficient game of whack-a-mole while critical alerts are missed and vulnerabilities remain exposed. Results from our own AI-driven SOC are particularly telling. Consider this. Leveraging this capability, we're able to ingest 36 billion events daily. Using AI, we're able to triage that number down to just 8 incidents on average that require manual analysis. This dramatically reduces detection and response time and frees up our analysts for more proactive threat hunting activity to stay ahead of the adversary. We've seen equally encouraging results from customer use cases of this capability, including a 5-fold increase in incident closeout rates and a 6-fold increase in the average amount of security data ingested and analyzed each day. Outcomes like these are necessary to stop threat actors before they can encrypt our systems or steal our sensitive information. Any way you look at it, national security, data security, and critical infrastructure resilience are being enhanced by AI-powered cyber defense, and we want to keep it that way, innovating relentlessly to put the best possible capabilities in the hands of defenders. As policymakers consider guardrails governing the development and use of AI, a risk-based and stakeholder-involved approach will help minimize harms without stifling necessary innovation. We encourage all entities to embrace the importance of AI for cybersecurity and look forward to working with you and your staff to further promote its adoption. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Yamani, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Lara, Ranking Member Matsui, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for offering me to testify today. My name is Dr. Sami Yamani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Viavi Solutions, an American technology company headquarters in Chandler, Arizona, with nearly 2,000 US employees. At Viavi, we are proud to be transforming communication networks using AI technologies. Whether we are helping plan how a network will cope with the traffic demands of major sporting events or when disasters strike, Viavi is bringing the power of AI to improve American telecommunications. In big cities and small towns across our nation, the introduction of AI-driven network solutions by Viavi are revolutionizing the telecommunication industry to keep Americans connected when and where they need it the most. While we do not work with everyday American consumers, our technology supports their critical day-to-day connectivity needs. Many of our tools have progressively incorporated AI and machine learning technologies to improve the accuracy and efficiency of network functions and take on tasks that human operators could never have performed, including proactively safeguarding against cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. Perhaps Viavi's most advanced tool for improving American communication networks is our AI-powered digital twin technology. These powerful applications create what we think of as a network's flight simulator to help our customers understand how networks will respond in the real world by first creating a virtual network of the provider networks and simulating millions of network events. Viavi's AI system enables real-time adjustment to manage complex problems in the network because they have seen them before in the digital twin. Viavi's proactive approach to network monitoring and management means that we can help providers speed repairs and reduce the need for extensive manual labor when restoring critical services during and after disasters. We can provide specific guidance about which particular parts of the network should be fixed and in what order to restore connectivity as quickly as possible. But disasters aren't the only stressors on our nation's network. Sporting events, celebration, and other mass gatherings can easily overwhelm a network, potentially cutting off the communication needed, for example, to reunite families in a large crowd or provide medical services. Here too, Viavi's AI-driven solutions help providers optimize their network, both in advance and as situation evolves. The challenges we face in securing our telecommunications supply chain are vast and complex, and another choke point where AI-driven solutions help serve the needs of American telecom operators and consumers. Specifically, as we transition to Open RAN, Open Radio Access Network, Open RAN technology, rather than a controlled network stack from a single vendor, Open RAN will consist of highly diverse set of disaggregated pieces of hardware and software components sourced from multiple vendors. Viavi applauds the incredible bipartisan work done by the leaders of this committee in drafting, enacting, and funding the USA Telecommunications Act to promote the development and use of Open RAN technology here in the United States. And we are also encouraged by your recent actions to advance the Open RAN Outreach Act to help ensure these technologies live up to their full potential. The goals you have set for this transition are critical, but present challenges to industry, challenges Viavi's AI solutions are built to address. Our AI digital twin technology learns the complex behavior of Open RAN and emulates them in the lab. In short, network operators can virtually build an ORAN or an advanced 6G network alongside a digital representation of their existing network and see how they will work together and gain confidence, all before the first component is deployed in a live environment. AI, like many significant technological advancements that have come before it, necessitates a discussion of regulations and guidelines to safeguard its operation and ensure security, safety, privacy, and impartiality. But not two AI technologies are equivalent, and each carry different risks, impacts, and implications. As the committee continues its pivotal work on AI, we urge you to embrace the nuanced nature of AI systems, particularly those offered by Viavi. Low-risk, high-value AI systems like ours, which we term telco AI, represent a new frontier in enhancing network security, resiliency, and efficiency. At Viavi, we take pride in our leadership in the field of telecom-based AI solutions and welcome the opportunity to be a resource to this committee. Our technologies hold the potential to profoundly contribute to the enhancement of American networks. We are committed to fortifying the critical infrastructure upon which our nation relies. And we thank you for the honor to testify here today, and I look forward for your questions.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Turner-Lee, you are recognized for 5 minutes. And if I just may tell the members, we are voting right now. So what I'd like to do is finish up with our witness testimony, and then we will run over and vote. And let me emphasize this. We will resume 10 minutes after the second vote starts, not when the second vote ends, after the second vote starts. So Dr. Turner-Lee, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Latta, Ranking Member Matsui, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. I want to thank you for the invitation to testify. I am Nicole Turner-Lee, a senior fellow and director of the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. The center explores and reports on regulatory and legislative policies that govern telecommunications and high-tech industries, and my particular focus is on the impacts of digital exclusion and artificial intelligence on vulnerable populations. The state of communications infrastructure in the U.S. has been important to the Biden administration and to this Congress, including the expansion of access to high-speed broadband networks for all and their affordability. This work is especially urgent after COVID-19 demonstrated the importance of being connected to the internet for critical services, including healthcare, education, employment, remote work, and government services. Having affordable, reliable, high-speed internet access, as well as the equipment, digital skills, and financial resources is a game changer, and being on the wrong side of digital opportunities is a social determinant of economic prosperity and the quality of life. So today I share that with the largest ever federal investment in high-speed broadband, we should be able to close the digital divide and use AI to strengthen communities through smart innovation, the effective delivery of government services, and the ability of users to fully engage in our democracy. However, our effectiveness in these areas will be dependent on how our digital infrastructure is used to protect the public from bias, ensure data privacy, and institute into action calls for federal guidance, including those proposed in the White House executive order. Prudent AI implementation can help green our cities, improve public transportation, and make public services more accessible. I recently returned from the Smart City Expo World Congress in Barcelona, and on the exposition floor were transformative demonstrations of how other countries are using AI, including IoT sensors to detect climate concerns. In cities like Seattle, traffic signals are using AI-powered analysis for transit data. In Philadelphia, the city is using AI-powered cameras on public buses to issue tickets for illegally parked vehicles. And of course, we talked about spectrum management and 5G allocation of spectrum for that purpose. Government AI use is also making public services more efficient and accessible while reducing some of the administrative burdens on civil service workers who now have access to automated tools. And consumers are also beginning to benefit from democratized AI as they can easily register community feedback and facilitate more responsive local government. But we know that AI comes with a range of risks and threats. I've already mentioned them: online bias, privacy violations, and implications for the workforce and workplace conduct. Both the overwhelming and underwhelming access to data for these models can target, surveil, and discriminate against certain populations with greater precision. For example, denying mortgages and credit to certain populations due to a series of inferential data that has nothing to do with their income or prior payment history, or using AI for decisions or beyond their intended purposes, like facial recognition technology that can open your phone but also arrest you falsely for a crime. Not having a federal privacy standard has contributed to data pillaging, and as more of our digital lives are fueled by these systems, the lack of comprehensive privacy protections just feed mass aggregation of personal data. We need Congress to urgently pass bipartisan federal privacy legislation as foundational to any comprehensive guardrails that we actually decide upon. And our current patchwork of state laws may generate too much uncertainty for both developers and consumers who are now forced to trade off their privacy for participation in our AI-driven world. Finally, AI will contribute to a new set of workforce and workplace challenges. Expanding communication networks and protocol will require a massive labor investment. Secretary Raimondo has predicted 200,000 jobs will be created as a result of the IIJA. But building an inclusive and equitable broadband workforce doesn't require us to use AI to replace them or not actually hire new people, but to leverage the technology for skills development, credentialing, job placement. And we need to avoid the distraction of allowing employers to monitor their employees by using surveillance tools. What I would suggest is that federal guidance is needed. The White House EO is a step in the right direction. I do agree that we need to base this on a risk management framework, but we need more congressional heft to be more binding, actionable, and enforceable. And that clear guidance should come in the form of providing clear disclosure and transparency to consumers around AI-generated content or the use of that AI in certain tools. In addition to the forthcoming 2024 presidential election, validation through watermarking will also be helpful, as it's been suggested by many of the people in this room. Smart cities needs to also advise residents on how they are also using AI. If we're going to have AI be transformative, we have to be equally aggressive on the legislation and guidance and equally aggressive on its transformative capabilities. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. That concludes our witnesses' opening statements, and as I mentioned, we will resume 10 minutes after the second vote starts, not ends, starts. Thank you very much. We will stand in recess. reconvening our subcommittee hearing for the day. Again, thank you for our witnesses for our little interlude there so we could go vote. Really appreciate that. And the chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Yamani, in your testimony, you discuss how Viavi uses artificial intelligence to build digital twins that simulate network performance in the real world. Across the country, states are planning to allocate tens of billions of dollars for broadband deployment. Can AI technology like digital twins be used to ensure broadband networks connect all Americans in the most efficient way possible, and if so, how?
Absolutely, yes. And digital twin technology will provide the capabilities to understand and learn what you have there, and then you can actually build tools and applications to actually efficiently define what the spectrum should have and how you can implement a much better approach to distribute the broadband with more equity. Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Rubin, I think that a lot of people are always concerned about with AI, especially on the cybersecurity side. I know that both you and Ms. Lang also talked about cyber. But when you're looking on the cyber side, when you're talking about the number of attacks that we have, one of the questions out there, how do you protect on a cyber attack to make sure that the AI is protecting you against that attack and not somehow that the cyber attack can simulate the AI that people thought they'd be using and all of a sudden use it against you? If you can follow that.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. So as I understood the question is, how do we avoid the AI being used for attacks against
Correct.
ourselves? Yes.
Because it would be that somehow that cyber attack would have gotten into the AI and it should really turn the tables and utilize it against you then.
Sure. So at Palo Alto Networks, we see a lot, right, with the telemetry and data that we have and the products that we have protecting our customers, and as well as with the research that we do. And we do see adversaries using AI to accelerate their own attack capability. And so this is something that's happening out there. That being said, when we look at the balance of how AI can be used against us or be used as defenders, we think that there's a real advantage for its use in defense.
Okay. Ms. Lang, when we're talking about, especially with algorithms and how they're being written, and I know that you mentioned especially on the privacy and the cybersecurity side, and all the attacks, but I guess one of the questions is how do we write the algorithms out there to be absolutely neutral so that people know that the AI isn't picking winners and losers out there, what's happening?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Congressman. So one of the things that's very important when we're thinking about steps to take to ensure that AI systems are performing in a way that is equitable for all parties is thinking through, right, we have input data and then output data or outputs from the AI system. On the input side, data quality is something that's really important. And so one of the measures that organizations can take is really looking through, how do we ensure that the data that we are inputting into the system is as high quality as possible. And what I mean by that is, how do we ensure that it is accurate, that it is representative, that it is relevant to the task that we are training the AI system for? And that's, one set of measures that organizations can take as they're developing and implementing an AI risk management approach to really ensure that AI systems are performing as they are intended to perform and not picking winners and losers.
Okay. Let me follow up. With the Biden administration's executive order on AI, which directed agencies across the executive branch to implement regulations that govern the use of AI in their respective industry sectors, how should federal agencies approach any potential regulation of artificial intelligence use cases within their own subject matter expertise?
Sure, happy to respond to that as well. So as you know, the executive order tasks many different agencies across the federal government with assessing and evaluating the use of AI within their particular sectors. And then from that point, in certain instances, they are directed to either develop guidelines or NIST is developed to help develop guidelines to help direct the use of AI in those sectors. But one of the things that's very important to consider as sector-specific agencies are looking at, how they would like to address specific AI-related risks is to first think through and look at kind of what existing authorities they have to address the risks. think through what are the concrete risks that we are trying to address within our sector, because risks in the healthcare sector are going to look very different perhaps than risks in the energy sector or risks in a different sector. So really thinking through what the risk profile is in each of those sectors, and then ensuring that as guidance is being developed, it is targeted to those risks is going to be very important. I think the other thing that I would note is just making sure that as, guidance is being developed, to write it in a way that is flexible and can account for the evolution of the technology. And that really means focusing on what outcomes should be achieved, as opposed to kind of prescriptively mandating this is how you should achieve those outcomes. So those are two areas that I think are really important for federal agencies to keep in mind as they're progressing on some of the taskings under the executive order.
Well, thank you very much. My time has expired, and the chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. One of the most exciting applications for AI is the role it can play in cybersecurity risk management. I've been especially focused on the growing cyber threat our K-12 schools face. Attacks targeting the sensitive information of students and their families are growing more frequent and severe. According to K-12, there have been more than 1,600 cyber incidents between 2016 and 2022. That's why I introduced the bipartisan, bicameral Enhancing K-12 Cybersecurity Act to provide new cybersecurity resources and promote better access to information. Mr. Rubin, can you describe the cyber threat landscape facing America's K-12 schools? And do you believe additional resources are needed to address this growing threat?
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. There's no doubt our schools are facing a cyber threat. From an incident response perspective, Unit 42, the team that I lead, helps organizations, including schools, who get hit with cyber attacks. In the past year, we've helped numerous who have had their networks taken down and they've been unable to provide schooling as a result. And so I think we do need to do more to help these organizations. Programs like FCC's E-rate program, which provide resources for network bandwidth, and I think there's a consideration to extend that to help with cybersecurity coverage, to help keep their networks safe. There's a great example of things that we could do to provide resources to these organizations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubin. I was an original co-sponsor of the USA Telecommunications Act that passed as part of the bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act. We provided $1.5 billion to support the development and adoption of open interoperable networks. As NTIA continues implementation, I believe AI will play a critical role in supporting Open RAN and multi-vendor networks. Mr. Yamani, while greenfield deployment of Open RAN networks are moving ahead, integration of Open RAN into existing networks can be more challenging. How can AI be leveraged to support Open RAN integration?
Thank you, Madam Congressman. Definitely, the problem with Open RAN today, or the potential of Open RAN, is to open up the supply chain and create more innovation. The confidence in these new technologies in terms of replacing what's currently there and get the confidence about its performance requires a lot of testing. It requires a lot of bringing a lot of maturity into the technology itself. And this is one of the areas, again, this concept of digital twin will create the more confidence, because you can actually build a complete Open RAN network with all the different components and test it at scale and find out if there are problems, if you can actually emulate what you currently have, so that when you rip and replace, you have more confidence in this new technology and you can deploy it at scale, not worried about that it can match the demands from the network itself.
Okay, thank you very much. As we talked about yesterday, President Biden announced a national spectrum strategy, which outlines a roadmap for making needed spectrum available for commercial use. As untapped opportunities for commercial spectrum go further and fewer between, we need to explore additional ways to utilize this valuable resource. I was glad to see the national spectrum strategy include an all-of-the-above approach for maintaining a healthy spectrum pipeline. Ms. Lang, How can AI be leveraged to support spectral efficiency? And can you describe some of the early use cases?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Yes, we were also pleased to see the release of the National Spectrum Strategy, and we agree that an all-of-the-above approach in licensed and unlicensed bands is incredibly important to continued wireless innovation. One of the really interesting things that AI is enabling is this notion of spectral efficiency, and given the fact that spectrum is in shortage and we need it to continue to innovate, AI can play a key role in doing that. So for example, AI can be used to optimize spectrum allocation and by determining both the environmental conditions and where the demand is and allocate accordingly based on those things. So that's one way in which it can help with some of the spectrum shortage problems.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and just ran out of time. Thank you. You're back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington, the chair of the full Committee of Energy and Commerce, for 5 minutes.
Ms. Lang, thank you for your testimony. Several of your member companies are working to create a standard watermark to authenticate AI-generated content. This mark would provide a transparent, easy means for Americans to readily identify the origins of images or videos and to verify its authenticity. Some companies have already announced disclosure or marking requirements on content that's been digitally altered by AI to help improve transparency. With numerous companies moving in this direction, do you think there needs to be a standard mark to identify when content has been digitally altered versus companies each implementing their own solution? And are there any drawbacks that you think of this approach?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Yes, several of our member companies are part of an organization called C2PA, which is working on provenance tracking standards that can be essentially leveraged to tag metadata in photos. And so that really helps in identifying both, who the creator of a piece of content is and also if and where it was altered. And so by assuming that by putting that into the data, that can be a helpful way to track the provenance of particular content. Right now, that is a multi-industry group, and so there are multiple stakeholders involved in developing that standard. And so the good news with that is, you do have a wide breadth of the community involved and then able to integrate the standard. Beyond that, certainly, I think additional standardization work will be needed to advance content authentication initiatives. Watermarking is one type of content authentication, but there are also things like metadata auditing, like provenance tracking, like I just mentioned, as well as the role that human authentication plays in all of this. And so, yes, additional standardization will be needed to ensure that watermarking in particular is applied in a way that is consistent. And certainly, I think it's worth exploring whether and how there can be a mark that is consistently applied to certain pieces of content, and that would be a good place for standardization to focus. But more broadly, I think we need to, not overemphasize on only one component of authentication because there are multiple different mechanisms that might be appropriate depending on both the type of content and also what the objective of the authentication mark is.
Okay, thank you. Something I've made abundantly clear is that in order for AI to be successful, and to ensure American leadership in future deployments of AI models, these models need information to evolve and mature. That's why I've been so adamant that before any action to regulate AI, Congress must enact a comprehensive data privacy and security law with provisions that work to protect Americans' data, provide them with more control over the collection, use, and transfer, and still allow for innovation to keep America a leader in the technologies of the 21st century and beyond. How should we balance this data minimization principle effort that limits what information can be collected from the get-go while also protecting the ability for companies to innovate? That's for you, Ms. Lang.
Yes, so that's a great question, and thank you for this committee's efforts to advance comprehensive privacy legislation. This is absolutely a foundational underpinning to address the privacy-related risks that you highlight. With regard to maintaining data minimization, this is a principle that we're supportive of in the context of privacy, and certainly in the way that AI systems are trained, they leverage a lot of data, and like I said, having a standard privacy law will help to mitigate risk associated with users' personal data being used to train the systems. One of the things I will note is in the context of AI, when we think about data minimization in particular, in some cases, in order to address things like biased outcomes, there is a need to actually analyze or collect sensitive information on the part of users so that you can train the system in a way that does not result in an output that is potentially harmful or discriminatory. And so this is something that when we're thinking about privacy legislation and AI legislation moving forward is really important to take into account, right? How do we balance that trade-off to make sure that
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Rubin, we've already heard today there's a wide variety of AI applications that will be used not only in telecommunications, but energy, healthcare, and others. Given the Biden administration EO on AI, what role do you think the federal government should play? And do you agree that any regulation of AI should be light touch, or should we create one centralized agency for regulating AI?
Thank you, Congresswoman. So from the federal government's perspective, the role that it plays is critical to ensuring the adoption of security safeguards and creating guardrails around the safe use. But I think it's also critical that any regulation considers the use cases that are going into play, right? From a cybersecurity perspective, that's very different than a use case as it pertains to maybe a consumer application, like I believe earlier there was an example of a mortgage application. And so that's a difficult balance because there's such a wide variety of applications, but I think it's important that whatever framework or regulatory considerations go into place allow for the operation without stifling innovation.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the chair, or the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. While it's promising that AI can help make our communications networks more reliable, efficient, and secure, the vast amount of data that is needed to train and run AI systems is staggering. Often that data includes massive amounts of information about individuals, consumers, and most people don't even understand how these AI systems work. And that's why it's important that consumers are at the heart of any AI discussion, and it's important that our committee work to include putting them back in control of their data to ensure companies collect only the consumer data they need to provide products and services to those consumers. So I just wanted to ask all the panelists a simple yes or no. Do you agree that the bedrock of any AI regulation must be comprehensive privacy legislation that includes clear rules around data minimization and algorithmic accountability? Yes or no? I'll start with Ms. Lang.
Yes, we support data minimization standards, but we hope to work with this committee on addressing appropriately targeted legislation for algorithmic accountability separately.
All right, Mr. Rubin.
Palo Alto Networks absolutely supports a strong federal privacy standard. Cybersecurity is an important aspect of protecting our privacy as well, and we believe it's important that any federal privacy standard recognizes that.
Thank you, Dr. Yamani.
Thank you. While we don't directly work with consumer data, definitely we agree that there must be some regulations on the use of consumer data, absolutely.
Thank you. And Dr. Turner-Lee?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted to say that one application of AI that stands out to me is its ability to fight robocalls and robotexts. So I'm going to go back to Ms. Lang. Can you tell us how deploying AI technology in communications networks will better enable network providers to eliminate robocalls and robotexts more easily?
Sure, happy to provide some examples on how AI can be leveraged to help combat robocalls. I think one of the really interesting things about AI is that it can use data to make connections between things that perhaps are not otherwise there. So in the context of robocalls, for example, AI can be used to analyze things like voice prints, or it can look at crowdsourced data from consumer reports about robocalls and see, for example, whether there's calls coming in at a particular time with a particular kind of repetition, and deduce from that that those might be suspicious or spam calls, and enable the blocking of those calls before they actually make it to consumers. So that's one way in which AI can be used to help combat robocalls.
Well, thank you. I also wanted to say that ensuring that our communications networks are safe and secure is a national priority, and I'm encouraged that AI can help in detecting and defending against bad actors on our networks before they can do serious harm. but we have to understand the types of data that are powering these AI cyber tools. So I'm going to go to Dr. Turner-Lee. Why is it important that consumers understand how AI systems are designed, trained, and operate, and how will a lack of understanding impact the ability of consumers to trust and effectively use these technologies?
I think you're approaching on the topic of AI literacy. It's really important for people to have some information around decisions that are being made around socioeconomic determinations, as well as just general decisions that AI systems are crafting, whether it's for fraudulent activity or it's just buying your kid, a pair of shoes. I think we're pretty dissident in terms of what it actually means to have these systems for us. If we're going to create trustworthy AI, Congressman, I think putting in place privacy standards, as we've discussed, minimizing data, but also having some deletion requirements also help. And I would also add disclosure, right? So people know that AI systems are in play in the decisions that are being made about them.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Rubin. What types of data are you using to train and operate your AI systems, and what protections do you have in place to protect any sensitive information that you use?
Thank you, Congressman. So the type of data that Palo Alto Networks uses to protect networks from a cybersecurity perspective is telemetry that's generated from endpoints, which are the laptops or desktops or mobile phones we use, from servers, from cloud devices, and from our networks. But I want to be clear that that telemetry is machine-generated information about how those systems are used. Things like what applications are running, things like what malware or other data might be operating on the machine, more metadata distinct from consumer information or PII. So it's system telemetry that gives us an understanding of how the systems are functioning and gives us the ability to assess what's going on from a security perspective.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan's 5th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the panel for being here. For me, talking about AI sometimes brings shivers to my bones, kind of like what I felt since I was in grade school and was hoping that the metric system wouldn't come to fruition in my time. But some of you will understand that. Mr. Lang and Ms. Lang and Mr. Yamani, telecommunications and broadband access are crucial services for my constituents, especially those who live in rural parts of Michigan, even in the cabs of tractors and combines. How can AI be leveraged to increase access to broadband networks and ensure internet access is deployed quickly and effectively? Ms. Lang?
Sure, thank you for the question, Congressman. One of the really interesting use cases for AI is around broadband mapping, and this is something that can be done more accurately and more precisely with the integration of artificial intelligence. So, for example, we have some broadband maps now, but AI can be used to help enhance those, and in certain cases, it can actually see from the data particular buildings that perhaps are without broadband access even within a community. And that can help to more quickly and effectively extend broadband and internet service to those populations. So that's really an interesting use case for AI on the broadband access side.
That'd be an amazing help with the maps that are out there right now. Yeah. Mr. Yamani?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, for the question. Definitely, using AI will help in understanding where the network capacity can be and efficiently utilize that, and you can actually optimize it. Also, the idea of bringing in Open RAN, which is, is going to provide more innovation that can create a much better kind of cost analysis of where you can bring the spectrum and how you can use it there. Definitely, all these AI tools will help create a much better way of distributing the resources of the network and hence improve a lot of access to broadband services.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lang, in your written testimony, you raised concerns about policymakers and regulators classifying entire sectors as, and I quote, high risk. Can you talk about the implications of what would happen if the entire telecommunications sector was classified as high risk?
Sure, happy to answer that question. So One of the things that we've encouraged policymakers to do is take a risk-based approach to AI legislation or regulation. And this means targeting obligations at use cases that are high risk or pose a significant risk to fundamental human rights or to people's safety. One of the things that we've seen taking place internationally is a tendency to designate entire sectors as high risk, which unfortunately misses some of the nuance. So when we're thinking about the telecommunications sector, for example, there might be particular applications within the telecommunications sector, for example, AI that's used as safety components in a critical infrastructure application in the telecom network that are perhaps high risk. However, if you were to capture the entire sector as high risk and designate all uses within that sector as high risk, you would unfortunately capture many low-risk use cases and many beneficial applications of AI technology, and the regulation would likely be somewhat disproportionate. So it's really important that when we're thinking about, how to characterize risk, that we're thinking through, okay, what are some of the very specific context in which AI is being deployed even within these sectors, and that any regulatory measures account for that.
In lieu of that caution, or because of that caution, if we were to label critical infrastructure as high risk, would that pull in telecommunications as well?
Yes, certainly depending on the definition of critical infrastructure used, but in the US there are 16 critical infrastructure sectors, one of which is the telecommunications sector. So certainly if critical infrastructure itself was labeled as high risk in the US, that would likely implicate the telecommunications.
Ought to be a caution there. Okay, thank you. Mr. Rubin, we hear a lot about doom and gloom of AI. Your testimony paints a rather different and promising picture. Can you please provide brief, concrete examples of how AI played a critical role in your day-to-day work as a cyber intelligence professional?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I would say the use of AI and the capabilities of AI is an absolute game changer for us as defenders, right? Being the group of people responsible for detecting and responding to cyber attacks, it gives us this incredible capability and power that we didn't have before. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and if I go back, 10 or so years, and I look at the activities that I would do when I'm responding to a cyber attack, much of it is manual correlation of disparate pieces of information and stitching that together by hand, which takes an inordinate amount of time and is simply not scalable. And so when you compare that with the speed of attacks today and how quickly the cyber adversaries are able to infiltrate our networks and move and take data, you have to operate at machine speed. And that's exactly what AI gives us the capability of doing.
Efficiency, okay. Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 33rd District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that this is a great topic today. I don't think that we can talk about it enough. And I wanted to ask Dr. Lee Turner a question. Your expertise and knowledge on all things technology, I think, has been really good for this committee today. And before getting into my line of questioning, I also wanted to thank you for the work that you do to advocate on low income having access to broadband. I think that is hugely important to make sure that people don't keep falling behind. I also appreciate the recognition in your testimony that the Affordable Connectivity Program is an important bridge between closing that gap in this country, both in districts that I represent that are urban and even more so in rural districts like the ones that many of our friends on the Republican side represent. And in your written testimony, you highlight that the digital divide and the use of AI are connected ideas. We are also aware that our broadband maps are an important tool in helping us close that gap. Could you explain in what ways AI can be used to depict how broadband access is being used and automate process to help enhance the broadband mapping process?
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much, Congressman, for those words. I'm humbled by that appreciation and recognition because this has been my life's work for 30 years. And I do want to reiterate, as it was said in the written testimony, we have to close the digital divide or our conversations on artificial intelligence use are just going to be null and void because people will be left behind here. With that being said, clearly I think we've heard that AI can be very useful in helping us to gather the necessary data when it comes to broadband assets, where they're located, how they're being used, in terms of management of those assets, and how we're deploying them in very efficient manners. We also still have to be careful that we may not have enough data. When you think about rural communities where the scarcity of data exists, the extent to which the AI will be effective in giving us a true portrayal of assets there will be, something that we'll have to go back and interrogate. So I think as we go into using AI in critical government functions and in areas where the value of data matters, we also have to check and make sure that the function of that data or the historical condition of that data is not going to be one that will put us back as opposed to forward because we know less about the communities that we're trying to serve.
Right, exactly. You had also said that government and industry leaders need to reimagine the technology workforce. You reiterated that skills-based hiring cannot only widen the talent pool for a broadband workforce, but also bring in a more diverse and underrepresented community and talent that have not benefited from this occupational sphere. Now, as you know, some economists predict that artificial intelligence could actually replace the jobs of many of humans in our country and around the world. Can you elaborate on how industry can ensure that people from all walks of life receive the necessary training and access without widening the gap between those with AI skills and those without?
Yes, I think, AI use when it comes to workforce is productive when we start to think about efficiencies, but unfortunately it has the consequential impact of releasing people whose functions are more repetitive that can be replaced by some type of automated function. That tends to be women and people of color. With that being the case, we should look at AI as not a replacement for workers, perhaps a way to do better skills training, better matching, better credentialing. We struggle right now in getting many people into apprenticeship programs. Perhaps the AI could be useful in opening the door and in letting them reimagine their role in that space as well. We haven't had those conversations, I think, in meaningful ways. And there's a community of workforce development providers who are thinking about the learning sciences and education and really among non-college degree workers as well.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you in closing here, I know that people are worried about the social impact of AI. I know that there are communities out there that are desperate, particularly for better crime-fighting tools to be able to apprehend people more quickly because of shootings and violence and things like that have taken place. And of course, there can be consequences to that, particularly for communities of color. And at a time when we're seeing more diversity in arts and culture, what challenges do you see presented by AI that can address some of these issues? Because I think that there's a big concern in that, and rightfully so.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I sit on the National Academies of Sciences. We're talking about facial recognition use by police officers and whether or not that's going to have these unintended consequences. Clearly, everybody's concerned about public safety today, right? And we want to see AI tools launched in ways that addresses those problems and remedies, potentially using predictive analytics to do so. But we cannot do that at the cost of individual people who may not be the ones that we're targeting or may be unfairly surveilled. Government has to pay attention to that and the role that we play in video surveillance, but we also have to pay attention to that and make sure that technologists understand that even though we're optimizing the technology for public safety outcomes, we're not further criminalizing people as a result of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida's 2nd District for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So as a representative of Florida's 2nd District, you can imagine how important natural disaster resilience is to me and to all communities in Florida. In my district, particularly the destruction of Hurricanes Michael and Idalia are fresh in our minds. Michael was a 185-mile-an-hour Cat 5 storm that caused serious damage to people in terms of their lives, property, and communication services. Upon landfall, the destruction to cell service was really very significant, including 78% loss in Gulf County, 70% in Bay, 50% in Washington County, and 45% in Liberty, Jackson, and other counties. So this was a really, blackout, if you will. Dr. Yamani, I'm happy to hear your solution-based approach at Viavi, helping networks remain operational. I wonder if you could expand a little on how AI helps communications stay operational during natural disasters and storms like that?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Yes, definitely AI and the tools of collecting data about where you have to do the next repair quickly and understanding from the data. For example, most of the hurricane will change the antenna alignments, right? The antenna will move. But a lot of the time, the operators don't know which one, and you have thousands and thousands of antennas. You have to go and inspect manually. Using AI tools and the data we collect, we can prioritize exactly where you need to go first quickly to restore the services so that a lot of these, first responders and all of the requirement connectivity is there. So using AI tools with the data that's being collected and provided and historical data of where are areas of concerns and how you can prioritize and do this more automatically, that's exactly what you need to actually quickly restore the services.
Well, hopefully we won't lose as much communication next time. On another note, the internal biases in AI concern me, as in fact it should concern everyone regardless of their political beliefs. We don't want autonomous entities to engage in mass censorship. There's an article in MIT Technology Review, August this year, that reported new research from several universities that found AI language models are rife with different political biases. Ms. Lang, in your testimony, you mentioned the importance of facilitating public trust in AI and that the ITI's members are making efforts to advance content authentication. I applaud the intent, to be fair. However, I hope to see incorporation of diverse information and opinions provided by artificial intelligence. For instance, Project Origin claims to combat misinformation in digital news information ecosystem through a collaboration of the New York Times, BBC, CBC, Radio Canada, and Microsoft. Do you think ITI would be interested in collaborating with some perhaps more conservative operations like News Corporation, Newsmax, to combat misinformation? Or are they only going to collaborate with left-leaning media outlets?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Any approach to AI should be representative of a diverse set of perspectives. And so certainly one of the ways in which AI systems should be developed and deployed is with multiple stakeholders being brought to the table and with input to ensure that that input is reflected in whatever the output of the AI system is. So certainly it's very important to have a diverse set of stakeholders at the table for AI to be developed with those perspectives in mind and to move forward in that way.
I think I agree with you, and I think that's important. Mr. Rubin, in your testimony, you mentioned that AI will be a game changer to help cyber defensives ward off nation states that threaten our digital lives. I agree. I'm grateful to hear that. However, we also welcome defensive cybersecurity developments by AI. Perhaps the offensive capabilities of hackers are growing at the same time. How would you describe the threat environment currently of the CCP, that's the Chinese Communist Party, accessing American citizens' data?
Thank you, Congressman. As it relates to the AI threat, generally, as I testified earlier, that is part of what is out there on the threat landscape, and we are seeing our adversaries leveraging certain capability with things like generative AI to make phishing attacks, for example, more effective, and to make some of their attacks faster from a speed and scale standpoint. As it relates to China, they're absolutely an adversary that we are watching at Palo Alto Networks and that we do see in terms of attacking our companies and our organization.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work. Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 29th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Lara, and Ranking Member Matsui for holding this hearing. And I want to thank our witnesses for your expertise and your opinions for us today. This year, we've seen a disturbing trend of social media platforms weakening their content moderation policies. YouTube, for example, has reversed its election integrity policy and now leaves up content promoting false claims that the 2020 election was the result of widespread fraud, errors, or glitches. As recently as September, Twitter eliminated its election misinformation reporting tool completely. We've seen the damage that widespread misinformation and disinformation can do to public health, public safety, and to our democracy. A few short years ago, a failed former president instigated a violent riot at the Capitol by weaponizing false information. The lack of oversight in the social media landscape, combined with the boom in public access to generative artificial intelligence and other tools, makes me concerned about the types of propaganda that can be spread throughout the 2024 election cycle. Dr. Turner-Lee, with the AI tools currently available to the public, how great is the risk that we see a boom in misinformation and disinformation online, and how much of this risk is due to the availability of these AI tools?
Thank you for that question. Obviously, since the previous elections, we've not spent the due diligence to strengthen our election infrastructure. And we're going to continue to see vulnerabilities in that infrastructure due to the fact that without, again, a national privacy standard, in addition to some protocols, norms, and standards on how we value the integrity of our voting system, we'll be prone to misinformation and disinformation. The nature of technology, unfortunately, in and of itself, is to amplify the opinions and biases that we have. And when it does that, it actually creeps into, I think, some of the areas in which we are most concerned about in our democracy. So with that being the case, our hope is that we will not see companies pull back on those efforts and that they will continue to be aggressive in monitoring those types of attacks. And I think, secondly, we are probably at a stage, and I'll end here, where we have to do increased voter engagement and awareness of these tools. And I think that's why AI literacy is particularly important going into this election.
Thank you. Dr. Turner-Lee, what are social media platforms currently doing to prepare for the risk of AI-generated propaganda ahead of the 2024 election and beyond? Is it enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing now, and it's been echoed through several conversations so far, is that they are using AI to beat AI, right? And figuring out ways to leverage the technology to help us do better content moderation. The challenge, again, is the AI has gotten smarter than us. And the way that it actually functions, now with generative AI, we can actually mimic voice and extract other textual information that can be perceived as evidence of not going to the polls. So I think with that being the case, having additional pressure on social media companies to continue to preserve our election integrity is really key and important, and raising awareness among consumers that they also have a voice in how to mitigate through some of these risks is really important as well.
Okay. You say it's gotten smarter than us. I hope you're not referring to Congress. Anyway, I'll move on to my next question. Thank you. Traditionally, we've seen social media companies invest less in non-English language content moderation. You recently wrote an article highlighting concerns about generative AI apps training on data that fails to include language and dialectic diversity. How might we see this play out with AI detractors that are designed to flag misinformation?
Well, I love that question, too, because I think we don't spend enough, Congressman, on Spanish language and the diversity of languages that show up in these models and train these models. The article that you're referencing, in the case of generative AI, we found that maybe under 1,000 languages are actually being trained in these large language computational systems. That means that there are a lot of people being excluded, not just in their participation and use of these tools, but to your point, misinformation can kind of go around that, or it can misinform people based on these platforms not being completely diverse and accurate. Going forward, we need much more investigation about this stuff, and we probably need some independent research and investment in places like the National Science Foundation and other places where we can have representative groups actually sit at the table and develop those models and training data sets. Yes. That's right, and I would just add to that, and a lot of researchers have been focusing on this, the data that we're putting into these systems are traumatized, meaning they're coming with all of our historical baggage alongside some of the modern day assumptions that we have about our world. So it's really important for us to continue to interrogate that and put in some comprehensive guidance or regulation that will help us steer in bias in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Time have expired. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Utah's 3rd District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing, and to you and the ranking member, our witnesses. My appreciation to my colleagues who take this issue so seriously, and many of them are very well informed on it. I'd like to start, Ms. Lang, with this concept of the executive order that you mentioned. Executive orders have advantages and disadvantages, right? One of them is they can be fast and move quicker than Congress, but they also may not be long-lasting. So a couple questions about the executive order that's out. Are there things in there that you would like to see move into legislation and that would be better in legislation? And can you give me a sense of the balance the executive order strikes between guardrails and overregulation?
Sure, happy to talk a little bit about the executive order. Certainly, there was a big emphasis on supporting innovation in the executive order, which is something that ITI was pleased to see. For example, it directs the National Science Foundation to launch a pilot program of the National AI Research Resource, which I know there is a bill present as well on the Create AI Act. This is something that we would love to see move forward, particularly because standing up this research resource is so critical to advancing research and development. So that was one area that we were particularly pleased to see. I'll also note it discusses and tasks DoD with launching a pilot program to leverage AI to both discover and fix vulnerabilities on critical government networks. This is another area that we see as particularly positive, again, demonstrating the ways in which AI can be used to bolster cybersecurity and actually patch vulnerabilities. In terms of balancing the regulatory burden with innovation and making sure that companies are able to continue to innovate, we did see the introduction in particular of obligations for companies to of a certain type to disclose red teaming safety results as well as other information to the federal government, and the government has invoked the Defense Production Act to require that information. That's an area, that we have some questions about, I think, moving forward.
And I would literally love to hear another hour, but I'm gonna move on because I know there's a lot there, but let me move to some things. So no surprise, this is also a big issue back in our states with our state legislatures and governments. And I had a chance last week to speak with our State Director of Commerce, and she brought up a couple of things that we talked about. One is this concept of legislating at a point in time when we know that a few years from now, the landscape's going to be totally different. In Utah, they're experimenting with an artificial intelligence lab, which allows companies to come in and operate in kind of a sandbox without over-worrying about regulation while we can all learn. And I guess my quick question to you is, what can we do here at a federal level to make sure that we're nimble in our legislation, and what do we have to be worried about?
Sure. So I think the regulatory sandbox or AI lab that you reference is one way in which to allow companies to kind of experiment without kind of knowing exactly kind of what their product is going to yield and then fix any sort of issues that come up. So that's one way in which to kind of test things. I would also highlight policy prototyping, which is kind of a collaborative approach where, again, industry stakeholders and other stakeholders are brought in to test particular regulatory or policy proposals to see how they work, whether they're fit for purpose, whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then if not, it can be addressed before it becomes law. So it's kind of a co-creation mechanism, which I think is also important. And then finally, just remaining outcome focused.
All right, Mr. Rubin, you wanted to jump in, but before you do, I'm going to at least ask a question that both of you can try to address before we run out of time. We also brought up this concept of liability. If I use ChatGPT for something, let's say the listing of a home, and I put data up and it's inaccurate, how do we get to assigning liability? And the other is notification, and what I mean by that is if I get on Home Depot's website and I talk to some artificial intelligence, I don't really care that it's artificial intelligence, but if I get on, let's say, a site for health information, and I'm not actually talking to a human, how do we make sure that consumers are notified if they're talking to a real person or AI? And Mr. Rubin, I'll give you the first shot at that and the previous question.
Sure. And from those two examples, Congressman, they're somewhat divergent from Palo Alto Network's core mission of protecting our networks and keeping our information safe. But what I can tell you is that however AI is used, the integrity of the information and the reliability of the results and the outcomes, as Ms. Lang said, is absolutely critical. So as we're building these systems, absolutely we have to keep them safe, and then we need to take steps to ensure that before they're put into production or go into use, that we can rely on the results.
I dearly wish we had more time, but I'm out of time, and I will yield back to the chairman.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Michigan's 6th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to privacy and equity in artificial intelligence, we have to act now. Left unchecked, the proliferation of AI raises concerns that'll be detrimental to families nationwide. The status quo in this ever-changing landscape is insufficient, and relying on self-regulation has consistently fallen short. These implications put at risk the security of our personal information that can easily be exploited by our adversaries. For example, the rise of sophisticated robocalls, deceptive advertisements, and deepfake technology, coupled with AI's potential to exacerbate the digital divide, are real problems. But on the other hand, there is real potential for AI to revolutionize our society. Combining AI with 5G technology, we can improve our healthcare and customer services capabilities while bringing to life a future of autonomous vehicles, improving lives, improving safety, and bolstering our economic growth. So it's crucial that we take AI and its potential impact seriously, and that Congress take comprehensive action to address the profound implications of this technology on our health, safety, economy, and national security to ensure we reap its benefits. Let me start with you, Ms. Lang. Could bad actors use artificial intelligence to take advantage of our vulnerable populations, our children, our seniors, and if so, how?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I think, like any other technology, AI has the potential to be used for good, and certainly it can also be used in ways that impact people negatively. And so, yes, certainly there are instances in which malicious actors could target vulnerable populations using AI, and this is a risk that is important to keep in mind when we're thinking through what appropriate guardrails might look like for the technology.
Thank you. Often driven by AI, robocalls can exploit these vulnerable consumers by using tactics to deceive them. Tomorrow, the FCC will vote on a proposal to begin investigating AI's role as it relates to robocalls and robotexts. While AI has the power to make it easier for consumers to get the information they're looking for example, when they receive AI-generated appointment reminders, but it can just as easily trick consumers. In 2022, consumers reported losing almost $8.8 billion to scams and fraud. And of that, $2.6 billion were from what AARP calls imposter scams. Dr. Turner-Lee, can you discuss how AI assists these scammers in taking advantage of Americans?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing compared to traditional robocalls and robotext is the ability to extract voice and text in ways that mimic loved ones or people that we have confidence in when it comes to our personal information. And that area, particularly for seniors, becomes a real hard way to distinguish between if this person has your best intent in mind or if this is somebody you've never met before that's just taking advantage of you. We do need to start gathering and documenting the technical cadence that works towards best practice. Right now, we just don't know because the AI is being deployed in these ways that are operationalizing these fraudulent activities. So stepping back, and hopefully the FCC will do the same in their rulemaking, is to figure out what do we need to learn more about this technical cadence I think would be really helpful.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time, so I'll yield back, and I will have some questions for the record.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Matsui, for holding today's hearing on artificial intelligence. With the recent executive order on AI from President Biden, and with the Senate holding multiple hearings on AI in the last few months, this committee is addressing an extremely timely and relevant policy issue. As a doctor, I am acutely aware of how AI can both spur innovation as well as pose serious risks, especially when it comes to healthcare. We should be encouraging developers to build AI technologies to supplement the work that we do as healthcare professionals. And at the same time, We must be sure to implement guardrails to protect patient data and to be sure that no harm is done in the process of implementing new technology, whether that is through disease diagnosis, clinical documentation, or medical research. We must ensure that AI is used ethically and transparently. Ms. Lang, in your written testimony, which touches on legislative and policy ideas for AI, ITI asks that Congress will follow a risk-based approach and examine existing laws, policies, and sector-specific risk frameworks before considering comprehensive legislation. As you might know, healthcare falls under these categories as it is regulated as an industry. Can you elaborate on these points and how the risk-based approach applies to the healthcare sector?
Sure, thank you for the question. Yes, so in thinking through a risk-based approach, it is very important to, as you outlined, there are several different use cases within the healthcare sector, and certainly something where AI was being used to perhaps perform a surgery that could impact somebody's life or safety. That's likely something that would be designated as high risk and subject to additional oversight and obligations to ensure that that AI is being deployed in a trustworthy and safe way. There might be other lower risk use cases as well in the healthcare sector. Maybe AI is helping to process billing statements in some way. And so there perhaps are different obligations or perhaps no obligations that are appropriate in that setting. So when we think about, what makes sense in the healthcare sector, it's really important to think through what some of the different use cases are that one would be seeking to capture underneath.
I think there are many obligations that definitely occur, and when exploring AI, data protection and user privacy is tantamount. This will be especially pertinent as we begin to use AI in the healthcare setting, where HIPAA plays a large role in keeping our most sensitive data safe. Mr. Rubin, how can we ensure that patient data used by AI is kept secure and safe from cyber attacks?
Thank you for the question. Cybersecurity generally in healthcare is a huge topic and of paramount importance because healthcare organizations maintain, as you said, incredibly sensitive information about patient care, about our health. And so broadly, we have a duty to protect that information. And really, it's about an all-encompassing cybersecurity program that includes technology, it includes the governance, it includes the processes that we employ to protect that information. And AI can be a part of that from a cybersecurity perspective, helping the responders and the defenders better prevent, detect, and respond to any intrusions into a healthcare network.
Do you see in the future that AI will be one of the arms of cybersecurity?
Absolutely, Congressman. In fact, in many ways, it already is. Palo Alto Networks has been using AI in our products for over 10 years, and we're continuing to innovate and make it more and more a common part of how we enable cyber defenders to protect organizations.
Thank you to all the witnesses for being present here today, and Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York's 9th District for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Let me thank our esteemed panel of witnesses for joining us today, as well as you, Chairman Lada and Ranking Member Matsui, for holding this very important hearing. The proliferation of artificial intelligence is undoubtedly exhilarating for business and consumers alike, but we also know that it's fraught with the potential for harm. AI tools can help us combat the scourge of robocalls, create more efficient transportation systems, analyze cyber threat data, optimize spectrum uses, perform content moderation activities and public services more accessible and generally improve the quality of life for so many. At the same time, with the proper oversight, transparency, and guardrails in place, AI also has the potential to bring the bias and discrimination of the analog age into this burgeoning digital era. Furthermore, while industry leaders and lawmakers alike are understandably enthralled by the potential benefits of AI-powered tools in the private and public sectors, We cannot forget two immutable facts. First, the key to unleashing our nation's full potential with respect to advancing AI in a safe and consumer-centric manner is a federal data privacy standard. And second, to ensure a more just and equitable future, we must prioritize closing the digital divide. The bipartisan infrastructure law's historic investment in broadband deployment will go a long way towards bringing historically underserved communities online, but we cannot forget that all the great developments in AI will be for naught if they cannot be accessed by those that need them the most. As policymakers, we must take care to appropriately balance our goal of fostering innovation in AI across all sectors with the need to bring all communities along, as well as mitigate the potential harm stemming from our reliance on AI and algorithms, particularly in critical decision-making. So my first question is directed to Dr. Turner-Lee. As you mentioned in your written statement, because AI is already being used to bolster wireless capabilities for 5G and next-generation technologies, the prevalence of smart city technology will only increase. What do you see as the most exciting opportunity to improve the quality of life for the public? And what do you see as the areas of potential concern?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman, and I know you followed this issue for a very long time in terms of smart city development. I mean, we are beyond the IoT stage where it was static IoT collaboration and coordination, and now we have AI that can make those systems much more efficient. And for communities, particularly vulnerable communities that have less agency over government resources, having the ability to be in connected spaces actually creates better quality of life, healthcare-wise, et cetera. And we're gonna see that develop more and more as AI comes in productive manners to include populations and give them agency with city governments. On the other side, where we have data deserts or digital divide concerns that go beyond our wildest imagination of people really left behind, we're gonna have to worry about the kind of data that's contained in smart city development and whether or not the network management that we're relying upon is actually gonna direct us to those communities. We're also gonna have to worry about procurement, right? In terms of making sure that we know the unintended consequences of the products and services that cities actually purchase. So I would say those things stay on my mind as we actually think about AI's use and ensuring that in the greater use of video surveillance, audio surveillance, microphones, et cetera, that we're not repurposing those for greater surveillance of communities simply because they're more connected.
Thank you. Any other of the colleagues on the panel want to address smart cities? Okay. Between advances in AI, the growth of telecommunications industry, and the historic investment in broadband from the bipartisan infrastructure law, the need for massive investment in telecommunications workforce is becoming increasingly apparent. Just last year, Commerce Secretary Raimondo estimated that bipartisan infrastructure law's broadband funding would create 200,000 new jobs. Dr. Lee, given the industry's workforce needs, what factors should lawmakers consider as we attempt to balance AI's potential ability to meet workforce shortages without displacing workers?
Well, first and foremost, I think, Congresswoman, we need to leverage AI for skills retraining and being able to help us understand the new jobs that are being available. Right now, the broadband sector, we don't have a full classification of the industry codes for those jobs, and AI can be very useful in compiling that information. The same token, when AI is introduced, it cannot be introduced as something that is only for those who have an educational degree. We need to push it down so the people who have less than college can also partake in these selection services and filtering services as well.
Very well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Idaho for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panelists for being here and your participation today. I have a question for Mr. Yamani. In Idaho, we have a significant amount of broadband networks, and it's there's a tremendous rural community, and in order to connect those, broadband networks have been proliferated quite heavily. And I wanted to just talk to you about that. Can you speak about ways in which artificial intelligence may be able to monitor the performance and the quality of those networks?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think understanding the quality of service that customers and consumers are getting is very important to actually make sure that these services can be used for their day-to-day life connectivity and the businesses. And definitely AI can help in understanding patterns of behavior where some malfunctions or some kind of misconfiguration of the network or something that needs more optimization where you can reutilize resources from different areas. It requires the analysis of a lot of these network data and using AI tools to be able to detect these patterns and provide algorithms for optimization. That's really where the AI can help ensure quality of service, but also improves some of the connectivities that consumers are getting.
Okay, so the optimization, and that might lead into the next question. I actually had identified for Mr. Rubin, but would welcome input from either of you. In regard to cost, cybersecurity costs, when it comes to broadband telecom service providers, do you see the potential there to either add or lower costs with cybersecurity and impact on security? And if so, can you just talk about that subject a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, Congressman. There's absolutely an opportunity for organizations who are adopting this technology and AI integrated capability to lower costs as it relates to the expenditure of keeping their network safe, their organization safe. And really this comes down to the ability to consolidate around fewer platforms, which still give you the capability from a coverage standpoint to protect your network and keep your information safe, and the ability to simplify and to aggregate data and information, security information down, and so you can have your teams focused on that and be more efficient in their protection of our organizations.
Thank you for that. I want to go back to Mr. Yamani and shift the topic just a little bit. But you noted in your testimony the importance of open radio access networks when it comes specifically to strengthening supply chain, trusted networks, and so on as we prepare to a migration for 6G. I know the committee has been working on some bipartisan legislation, and I've supported that, for defense appropriations. H.R. 1340 is one of those examples. I know that it appropriated in CHIPS and Science Act some revenue streams there. What has your experience been when it comes to grant applications and the grant application process? And do you see improvements that we can consider here on the congressional side as we look towards those smaller providers in rural areas? And just want to open up that topic and get your feedback, please.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely, we are seeing that to actually promote the Open RAN, there is a requirement there that the operators see the benefit, but also get the confidence. I think you're replacing a single vendor that has been there for a long time, that they build a lot of equity in terms of performance and operation. I think one of the challenges we are seeing in Open RAN today is that you really need this kind of test bed, and again, coming back to the digital twin, a flight simulator, so people can test Open RAN and get more confidence so that they can deploy it. And I think the grants are playing a very important role that we have been working with NTIA in terms of creating this test bed and providing capabilities for smaller players to come in and first develop the Open RAN, but also at the same time provide confidence for the operators. Yes, this technology can work, it can actually work at scale, and it can provide the performance that you are looking for.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, again, to the panelists, thank you for your feedback. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California's 16th District for 5 minutes for questions.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking member, Matsui, for holding this very important meeting. And to each of the witnesses, I think you've given terrific testimony. I love hearings. It's less coming from this side, more from there. And I think that you've been highly instructive. I think that the testimony today has made clear that that AI holds tremendous promise, just tremendous promise. And to the surprise of many people, when they hear that it's been around for a long time. But since December, it's certainly, in terms of media coverage, it's the shiny new object. But it also holds peril. And so it's up to us collectively, and it's what your testimony is about, of, what kind of rules of the road should we write. One of the areas that that I've been working on because, there can be an exacerbation of some of the things that really plague us today, the inequities in our society. We don't want AI to continue advancing that. We don't want a refueling of misinformation or disinformation. We want transparency. We want more competition. So it really is a very full agenda, and it's a challenge for the Congress because this is, we want to get it right. One of the things we know for sure is that the resources that are needed to develop much of AI are very expensive, and for the most part are held exclusively by a handful of high technology companies. And this concentration means that most of the talent in America is prevented from participating in AI R&D. This reduces, in my view, competition. It limits the boundaries of innovation. It hampers our ability to develop safe and trustworthy AI. And that's why I've introduced the Create AI Act, which is, it really is nonpartisan. It's also bipartisan, and it's bicameral legislation to provide these resources to all sectors of our society. There's not just one sector in our society. It's not just high technology. It's not just the public sector. It's the academic sector. It's the small business sector. It's the nonprofit sector. So in order to get there, I think we need to democratize AI. So I want to go to Ms. Lang. I read your testimony last night. Thank you for referencing my legislation, which does democratize AI. Share with the other members that are here why you think it's important for researchers across all sectors to have access to the same resources that the large technology companies have, and the purposes certainly of this hearing, because this is telecommunications, how the telecommunications and cybersecurity sectors would benefit from it.
Sure. So yes, thank you for your efforts to advance the Create AI Act. This is certainly a very important piece of legislation, particularly because, as you reference, access to compute can be very expensive. So for small companies in particular, that may be a barrier for them to actually advancing very critical research and development that's needed to develop certain standards, to develop certain metrics for evaluation, things like that. So having access to high performance compute, to share data sets, to a collaborative platform to work with other academics, big tech, small tech, all types of people is going to be very important. And this type of resource can help to do that. And so really having the collaborative platform and making sure that multiple stakeholders from multiple sectors can come together to access this shared platform is going to be really critical to advancing that research and development moving forward.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and would encourage my colleagues to examine the legislation. It's simple, but it is really creates, I think, a very important foundation for us to move from. I want to thank each of you for your testimony. I didn't have time to ask each one of you my questions, but you're going to hear from me, and I know you're going to respond to the questions. So I think you've moved the ball down the field today. It's a wonderful hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Doris. Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia's 12th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Latta, for holding this hearing. Before I turn to questions for the panelists, I would like to make an important point about accountability for generative AI outputs. As this committee considers what a regulatory framework for generative AI might look like, I think at a starting point, we should all agree that generative AI outputs should not be afforded the same protections as social media companies have had to date. We need to make sure that Section 230 does not apply to generative AI outputs. Having touched on that, I would now like to focus on some of the concerns I've heard from different groups about artificial intelligence. Ms. Lang, how can we make sure that we protect artists and publishers' intellectual property rights if AI models are producing value and revenue after being trained on data originally created by artists and publishers? Shouldn't those artists and publishers receive compensation?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Certainly, we agree that AI must be developed in a way that protects jobs and ideas and simplifies tasks and creates efficiencies. With that in mind, it's very important to bring the creative community into conversations that we're having about artificial intelligence and about copyright. Though I will note, in the United States, we have a legal framework for copyright and copyright law, and this is something right now that we're seeing play out to some extent in the courts. They are looking at copyright and looking to see how principles of fair use apply or don't apply in the context of generative AI. So this is something that we're seeing play out and be adjudicated actively. And so really staying abreast of those developments will be helpful in figuring out whether copyright law needs to be updated or changed in some way to account for some of this.
As far as biases in AI models, Ms. Lang, what data sets are used to measure bias?
So with regard, I can't speak to, kind of what individual companies are leveraging because it really depends on the application that they're building their AI model for, but we take concerns about biased outputs very seriously, and all of our member companies who are developing and deploying AI are seeking to institute risk management practices to help address bias so that it doesn't negatively impact folks.
So the member companies are deciding which data sets are used?
Yes, depending on how their models are going to be
What
applied.
people conduct the analysis determining whether bias is in a model exists?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What people conduct the analysis determining whether bias in a model actually exists?
So again, it depends on which member companies are looking at it, but several of our companies have stood up AI ethics boards, which are groups of different stakeholders, both within and sometimes outside of the company, that come together to review certain applications that are being developed. Certainly, that can include sort of what data is being pulled to train the model, things like that, to determine if and how to proceed with certain developments.
What is in place to make sure that their own internal biases aren't affecting their decision as far as bias is concerned?
Yes, so this is a very important question.
Is it a peer review system, or how does it work?
Again, it varies depending on which company we're talking about, but certainly all of our companies take very seriously this and are keeping in mind, right, the fact that there are systemic and societal biases that are present, and that may account for certain decisions that are made. And so being actively aware of that is something that's very important. They're also doing things like risk and impact assessments, which can help to, at the outset, identify potential areas where there might be issues or biased outcomes so that those can be mitigated before it is publicly deployed.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, we want to protect private property rights here, and that's an issue that needs exploring. But then how can companies best identify and mitigate bias as far as in algorithms to ensure fair outcomes for all users? How are member companies developing this AI transparency and accountability? These are all questions that need to be answered. Is there anyone else that would like to share your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah. Let me share maybe something similar to what we're doing in the network side. AI and the training data will create these biases, but at the same time, you can also use another independent AI to actually test the AI and find out these biases. So the idea of AI guarding AI and AI testing AI, it's something that we're also looking at, because you're going to have to let AI, it's happening. So, but at the same time, put the guardrails and have an independent kind of AI actually testing and identifying the bias.
Where I'm from, they ask, who's looking after the hen house here? And so I guess AI is looking after AI. I'm out of time and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida's 9th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Artificial intelligence is an exciting new technology that's helping solve some of society's most complex problems. We saw during the pandemic that it was a supercomputer utilizing AI that helped us with discovering remdesivir, the first treatment for COVID, from the Department of Energy, which is pretty unbelievable. That's just one example as we're looking at a lot of these issues. It could also be a disruptor. We saw that in entertainment with the latest contractual negotiations in Hollywood with professional services, even tourism. We see in Central Florida and Orlando that travel and tour info, bookings, ticketing, and even line management and attractions are utilizing artificial intelligence. I was excited to file the Bipartisan Jobs for the Future Act with co-sponsors like Lisa Blunt Rochester, Andrew Garbarino, and others. And the whole idea was to direct the Secretary of Labor and NSF to conduct studies on the impact of AI on our U.S. workforce. So I was pretty excited to see President Biden put out an artificial intelligence executive order that mirrors this bipartisan legislation, but we know it's temporary. It's information gathering. This is not enough. It's going to require congressional action from this committee and others in the Energy and Commerce Committee to develop rules of the road. This is an important oversight hearing. We need to listen, but then we need to draft and debate solutions and then act. Internet privacy and comprehensive artificial intelligence legislation are two things that we really need to get moving on to promote innovation, protect consumers, and provide guardrails to artificial intelligence development. Dr. Turner-Lee, what are some of your thoughts on the positives, the challenges, and the limitations of President Biden's AI order and sort of the work that's piling up for this committee to get done?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. I think the president's order really helps us in bringing agency back to consumers when it comes to AI's development, and it's promoting a lot of what you've discussed, equity and how we actually develop these tools matters, and it matters in ways that it should be non-discriminatory. I did also like the fact that workplace and workforce are mentioned in the order, because we've just not been able to get ahead because of the digital divide when it comes to these advanced technologies, and we have much more time to think through these things. I think the inherent risk that we probably have with AI right now is kind of related to the previous question, is who's sitting at the table making these technologies. We tend to, what I really, really like about the order is the fact that it places people in the center of being producers of technologies and not just consumers. Farmers should actually develop and sit at the table with technologists developing farmer AI. Educators should sit at the table when it comes to educational AI. Technology companies should not only have the agency and rights to tell us as subjects what we should actually be accepting as products for us.
Thank you. This committee already passed my Consumer Safety Technology Act out of the subcommittee, and it would harness the power of artificial intelligence to root out dangerous products and fraud, among other reforms for the FTC. The criminals already have AI, so the cops on the beat need to have this technology as well. And AI needs both strong internet access and can help us make spectrum more efficient. That's why I applaud the FCC for their notice of inquiries for that, for stopping robocalls, something, Chairman, we could all get behind, and also working on predicting natural disasters, a key issue for Florida. Dr. Yamani, we see climate change, extreme weather, and while we're working on reducing our emissions through the IRA, can you elaborate on how AI can help us predict hurricanes, tornadoes, bomb cyclones, winter storms, you name it, through complex data sets and using AI for these predictive models?
Thank you for the question. Definitely, AI can provide a lot of insight into different data sets. We're more focused on the networking side of the telecommunication, how it manages the disasters in terms of predicting the impact on the network itself, and being able to proactively, analyze the data and, work with the resources of the network such that when it impacts, you have the minimum downtime and it doesn't impact people and businesses and the environment. So definitely from this aspect, AI plays a very important role.
So communications resiliency is critical to not only analyze data, but also to keep first responders and others up and running to respond. So thank you so much. My time has expired.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Last Christmas, Tennesseans, especially where I'm from in East Tennessee, experienced rolling blackouts, and that was due to a major weather event resulted in TVA failing to have an adequate base load of power. Mr. Yamani, can AI predict potential network failures or equipment malfunctions before they occur?
Absolutely, and in fact, now using AI more and more, the concept again of building this digital twin where you can have a copy of your network continuously doing what-if analysis, right? And that's where AI helps. So you can actually continuously, like again, it's a flight simulator. The more you use the flight simulator, the more you can predict what can happen. So, you know, being proactive in terms of understanding all the different nuances of how can a certain rollout, a certain blackout can impact, and how we can quickly, you know, the problem is not detecting the disaster, but what happens after the disaster to actually quickly restore the services.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of companies lost a lot of money because they had no power. Does AI contribute to proactive maintenance strategies and reducing the impact of these unexpected outages?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the AI plays an important role. The data collected from the network, when you do it through learning and predicting algorithms through the AI, will actually help with that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Lang, how can AI help satellites communicate with one another, and how can that ensure my constituents, because they live in a rural mountainous region, have access to better connectivity where internet infrastructure is more difficult to build out?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Were you asking about satellites? Okay. So that's an area that I am somewhat less familiar with, so I would have to look into that a little bit further and get back to you.
That's fine. We can do that. Mr. Rubin, in your testimony, you state that AI-driven SOCs have been a force multiplier in reducing detection and response time in cybersecurity events. You stated it's reduced your company's detect time to 10 seconds and your response time to 1 minute for high-priority alerts. What do you define as a high-priority alert?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. It's an alert that raises in severity to where it can have a security impact on our ability to conduct ongoing operations. So part of what AI actually helps with is the prioritization of the criticality of the security alerts that are coming into the SOC. And so it helps the analyst identify those that they need to turn to immediately, so ultimately they can triage those faster.
Okay. What's the best way to prevent data leakage, since it seems to be a huge problem?
Thank you. So data leakage as it relates to AI or with our—
As it relates to AI and cyber.
Sure. I think that we have a duty from a cybersecurity perspective to protect the information that we're putting into these models. And so as companies, whether they're tech companies, healthcare, or other industries, are building their own AI models to take advantage of the gains in efficiency and other operational benefits, we have to be very careful to build cybersecurity controls around how we protect them as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. We hear a lot about the debate between protecting free speech and social media platforms' desire to moderate content. Ms. Lang, what level of human oversight is involved in the content moderation process alongside AI algorithms?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. So I can't speak to individual company practices. It varies between companies, but certainly there is an important role for them to play in making sure that harmful or illegal content is removed from platforms. But certainly, again, they are operating in the U.S. where free speech is an important protection that's granted under the Constitution. So there's different practices that different companies are undertaking in order to address that.
Okay. How does big tech ensure that they're not over-censoring content?
Pardon me?
How does big tech ensure they're not over-censoring content?
Thank you for the question. So certainly there's different practices that different companies are undertaking. One of the things in particular that's important to note is that AI can actually help to provide more objective and consistent valuations around some of the content that is on the platform. So that's actually one use case for AI, that it does help make it more consistent and objective. Beyond that, there are efforts undergoing that companies are undertaking in order to ensure transparency and to ensure that there are more consistent metrics in place so that it doesn't inadvertently prefer one type of content over another, and so that citizens have access to a wide variety of perspectives.
Okay. Does anybody else want to answer quickly? Okay, my time is up. I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Texas's 7th District for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman Latta, and thanks to you and Ranking Member Matsui for holding this hearing. I agree with my colleagues who've gone before and saying this has been a really good hearing. There's been a lot of good information, good questions, and I've really appreciated the testimony of all the witnesses sharing their thoughts with us today. I'm sorry that I missed Representative Allen, because I really appreciated some of his questions, especially around AI and copyright and content creators, and really thinking about the challenges we have when it comes to learning. But what I wanted to follow up on his question, he was asking some questions about bias. And so I wanted to circle back to you, Dr. Turner-Lee, because you talked about the potential for bias and for exacerbating sort of existing inequalities in your written testimony, talking about the digitally invisible and experiences that are underrepresented. And so what I would love to know is if you could talk a little bit more about how we address that bias and what the researchers and experts kind of recommend as ways to achieve unbiased models.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman, for that question. I think today we've been speaking of bias as a static concept, and really the inputs that go into AI models may be static based on our presumptions, our values, our beliefs. I always constantly tell people computers don't bias, we do, right? So how the model starts is actually the bias that goes into the model development. But over time, the model actually takes on its own characteristics. Once it's deployed in the real world setting, it begins to pick up with our digital footprints these behaviors that then lean towards either explicit bias that has high risk implications, or bias that just may be, I like buying black jackets, and that's where I want my ad bias to be. My point is, we constantly have to interrogate these models. There's no way out of this. First, positioning seats at the table for people who understand the lived experiences of communities as a start. Putting in accountability measures that allow us to have interdisciplinary conversations around this. I'm a sociologist, I'm not a computer scientist. So I understand society, whereas my computer science friends understand the technology itself. So forcing that interdisciplinary perspective. And then giving some leeway to groups that are not typically developing data sets, to be able to go in and hack through, or we're seeing red teaming now as a best practice, so that they can identify where the bias is actually forming, but really tackling the iterative progression of bias, which is something I think, again, as we have conversations, this is not something that we can turn on and turn off, Congresswoman. It's something that evolves because these technologies, different from others, grow with who we are. And that is why they actually represent the outputs that they have.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think it's really helpful in thinking about, how do you do that? How do you interrogate the model, and how do you continue to do that and set up a system where that is something where you're not just confirming existing bias and that you have the opportunities. Seems like a challenge for the computer scientists as well as for the others. I was a history major, so I'm on that side of the world too. But I do think as we're sitting here talking about kind of what we do going forward, the kinds of things that we can help with from Congress, there were two other things actually that you touched on. I'm not sure I'm gonna have time to cover both of them, but I would like for you to talk a little bit more about AI literacy. I think something everybody up here can understand are the challenges that we face going into 2024, and the idea that we need to educate the public about potential uses of AI. I think we've all experienced, it takes a lot to break through, kind of in any context. We've all done it in one way, but how do we educate about, how do we do AI literacy? What does that look like, especially when it comes to voter education? What does that look like?
I love that question as well. I mean, I think first and foremost is just basic communication around these new systems and alerting the public that these new systems exist. giving some accountability to companies to do disclosure so that people know that decisions are being made by automated systems versus systems that tend to be much more analog conceived. And then I think the other thing, and I've suggested this in my research, is giving people tactile reminders around this. I commonly use the reference of the Energy Star rating program when you're going in to do consumer appliances. That's a multi-stakeholder process that gives some assurance of these tools, and it gives accuracy, and it also reports where there are going to be inefficiencies. And that comes from energy folks, appliance people coming together and coming up with some standards. Having those standards will help us with literacy, I think, and I think Congress can play a role in just finding ways to resource those efforts or to bring those standards to bear.
Great. Well, I'm going to run out of time for my last question. So I'll just put this out there, and maybe if y'all want to respond in writing. We've talked a lot about privacy in this hearing, the need for digital privacy. We've obviously addressed it in our committee before, and the chairwoman mentioned today her interest really in moving that forward. So I would just love to know if y'all can maybe submit for the record kind of what you would recommend we be thinking about in the context of privacy protections in the context of AI when we're thinking about how to put together a framework. What are the AI considerations that we should be taking into account in that process? And so thank you all very much for your testimony. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio's 12th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. My first question is for Ms. Lang. AI has the potential to revitalize businesses and improve efficiency across industries such as energy development, healthcare, and telecom. Ms. Lang, in your testimony, you touched briefly on how AI has the potential to increase efficiency in the use of our nation's spectrum. You specifically state that some demonstrations have shown a 10% increase in efficiency. Can you elaborate more on these demonstrations? And follow-up question with that would be where they're using some type of spectrum sharing?
Sure. AI can certainly enable spectral efficiency. And so that's one of the exciting things that we're seeing as a use case is really enabling both the dynamic allocation of spectrum as well as adaptive spectrum access. So based on incumbents that are in different bands and where demand is and also what environmental conditions are like, AI can help to allocate spectrum in a way that is more efficient, and that really helps with some of the spectrum shortage and finite resourcing problems that we have in that regard.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Dr. Giacomini. Thank you. I'm interested, sir, in learning more about the potential for AI to have a role in network slicing. As you know, network slicing allows portions of a network to be sliced and used for specific needs. Doctor, can you give a brief overview of network slicing, why it's important, and what, if any, role AI can play in network slicing?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Yes, definitely, network slicing is a new technique in using the network efficiently. So you can actually proactively create new applications, let's say, for automotive industry, for healthcare, using the same kind of network infrastructure. You don't have to build a specific network for that. So you use the same network, and then you create a slice within it using different resources to actually create the service for these kind of applications. It has a lot of benefits. First of all, it uses the network efficiently, coming back to the spectrum efficiency. That means you can use more of the same network on the same spectrum, and AI will help you decide how you can do that. But also, it is a very important thing when we talk about, for example, energy efficiency. One of the biggest problems right now is telecom in 5G and then coming with 6G is that we're densifying the network. We're using a lot of different resources out there, and energy is a big issue. AI, with the network slicing capabilities, can actually use efficiently, decide how the energy being used, and reduce the need for more energy and distribute the energy efficiently.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my remaining time. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Illinois' 2nd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chair Latta and Ranking Member Matsui for holding this morning's hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for participating. Dr. Turner-Lee, good to see you. I have been tracking the European Union's progress as it's considered and developed its AI Act. In fact, I testified at one of their hearings. You acknowledge that this could be the world's first comprehensive AI law. As a comparative question, can you explain the European Union's general approach to AI? And do you think there are any aspects of their draft legislation that the U.S. should follow, or should we take a different approach?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, and one that I've known for many, many years. So I think the EU has been really interesting and quite different in their approach because of the prescriptive nature in which they actually assign AI in terms of high, low-risk algorithms, and they've been doing that for quite some time. They also are different because they've actually put together a privacy regime as well as a market regime to sort of help define where they may go with this global AI law. With that being the case, I think some value that they do bring to the conversation, despite their different regulatory approaches in various digital environments, is a mouthful of Ds, is that there's a lot of information that we could probably glean in terms of sectoral guidance. There is a part of this EU Act that is intriguing in terms of how we should be looking at different industries differently, how we should be looking at the differences between high and low risk algorithms, and potentially how we should be enforcing or policing them. So I would say as they develop this, we definitely can glean some aspects of that, some of which you've actually also mentioned in your testimony, to bring to this committee.
It doesn't seem like Americans hold privacy dear, and it doesn't seem like they hold it as dear as us, or I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the European Union has a different context for which they've actually deployed these tools. I mean, when we think about their early adoption of the GDPR, they were working on that 6 years prior, and the technology had changed probably over the course of those discussions. Here in the United States, we do have this float between innovation and having a nimble enough regulatory regime that allows us to grow into this, but we're somewhat behind, too, when it comes to a national privacy standard as well. Where the EU will define, the future of AI globally is if they do get ahead of us, they will push forward with standards that we may have to adopt if we want to do business with them. And so I think that's something that we need to continue to pay attention to and take, as you've said, perhaps some aspects of it that have been proven, tested, look interesting, and explore them here.
Thank you. For all the witnesses, there's been discussion about whether Congress should create a new federal agency to regulate AI. And to all the witnesses, would you recommend that Congress creates a new federal agency to oversee AI, or do you think an existing federal agency can regulate this advanced technology? And I'll start with you, Ms. Lang.
Sure, thank you for the question, Congresswoman. As I referenced earlier, I think the sector-specific approach is going to be really critical here, particularly because there are independent regulatory agencies that have significant expertise in their sectors, including, you heard me talking about healthcare earlier, different regulators that have significant experience with that. And so risks are going to differ, and they have the best level of understanding within their particular jurisdictions of what those risks look like and how they play out. That being said, it may be the case that we need to help bolster expertise in different federal agencies depending on how approaches are taken in different areas, whether, maybe one sector agency needs additional resourcing than another. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we're moving forward. But I think the sector-specific approach is the right one.
Thank you. Mr. Rubin.
Thank you. I would agree that a sector-specific consideration is important as it relates to cybersecurity. For example, CISA has done great work helping private sector and public sector entities. They have a lot of expertise, almost from a practitioner lens themselves. And so I would say enabling those use cases specific to the sectors and the outcomes of how they're using AI would be a good approach.
Thank you. Dr.
Yes, I agree. Again, having a sector-specific approaches is important because we need to understand nuanced approaches of AI. And I said in my testimony, not two AIs are exactly the same. Our, what I call the telco AI is a low risk, but it provides a lot of innovation. So we don't want to over-regulate that so that we can enable innovations. But I understand there are other aspects of AI in other sectors that requires more regulation.
And quickly.
I'll just say quickly, I think sector-specific guidance is actually helpful, but I do think we need harmonized, comprehensive regulation, because that will bring it all under one umbrella for us to actually have the same conversation when it comes to standards.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 23rd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. It's been a really interesting hearing. Ms. Lang, I have to start with you. You said in your testimony that the executive order was just one piece of the puzzle in establishing a regulatory framework for AI, and I completely agree with that. I think the executive order was very helpful in a lot of different ways, but I mean, obviously, because of the separation of powers, there are things that the executive branch can do, which is to control the federal bureaucracy, and there are things that the executive branch really can't do, which is to establish regulatory guidance for private industry. Now, the executive order, I think, had some overreach in it. It invokes the Defense Production Act to be able to impose some regulation on industry, which I think is not going to stand up to legal scrutiny. But as you said, Congress has an important role to play here. And certainly establishing that regulatory framework is a big part of that important role. So I'd like to ask you about that, about what role does Congress have to play here? Because obviously we have a system of federalism here in the United States. We believe that states should have the right to establish regulation in things that don't interfere with the federal government's prerogative over interstate commerce. But it gets a little messy with AI because AI, on the one hand, is clearly interstate commerce related. But on the other hand, is going to be so pervasive, it's going to invade most aspects of our economy. So the question I want to ask about is preemption. Do you think that the federal government ought to preempt this and say the regulatory framework that we create is going to be the regulatory framework for AI? Or do you think that we should let the states innovate on this? Or do you think that the answer is somewhere in between?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. It's a good one, and certainly something that we have seen play out in the privacy context as well, where states have started to create their individual approaches in lieu of comprehensive privacy legislation at the federal level. I do think, it will likely be somewhere in the middle. Right now, we're kind of still in the early days of both internationally what's happening, right? We were just talking about the European Union and how they're approaching it, but certainly here in the US too, we're starting to see states think about it. So, I think as we proceed, we'll have additional information about what an appropriate legislative framework looks like, but I do think to some extent we need to be considering the conditions that are occurring in the states and kind of what's progressing there, and then we'll figure out what needs to go into legislation or a framework at the federal level.
Right. Well, I think that you were correct in bringing up federal data privacy as an example of what can go wrong, because the federal government failed to act on that for so long that now we're going to have this patchwork of 50 different state regulations. I think we've got 23 already, and that's very destructive to entrepreneurialism and interstate commerce. So I think we want to make sure that that does not happen again with respect to AI. But my point is that we're at a fork in the road, right? We have to choose one or the other, or something in between, but it has to be done now. Dr. Turner-Lee, thank you very much for being here, and I actually think it's very helpful to have a sociologist here. I'm a computer scientist, so we've got the spectrum covered. I wanted to ask you a sociology question, because you had said in your testimony that you have a grave concern with the identification of AI-generated content, which is something that I'm very concerned about as well because of its potential use to spread mis and disinformation. And you mentioned watermarking as something that could be used to identify with that content. But let me push back gently on that, because I have a sociology-related concern about that. The problem is, if we were to establish a rule that all artificial content is watermarked, then it would all be watermarked except for the stuff that was generated by malicious actors that really were bent on deception. And I think that from a sociological standpoint, that would desensitize the public to the fact that AI-generated content, does exist and can fool them. So, I mean, I would think that maybe watermarking should be used, maybe in addition to that, to verify the authenticity and the provenance of real content. So if you get a CNN broadcast, you've got a digital watermark on there that verifies that it's a CNN broadcast and not generated. Yeah. So would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I agree we should have a taxonomy, right? We shouldn't necessarily say that everything is watermarked, because it doesn't necessarily have to be. But where there are instances of high risk or high vulnerabilities, clearly we should maybe present a taxonomy of where we want to use that. And happy to follow up with you.
Sure. Well, I mean, my fear is that we have learned, to our misfortune in other domains, that when we make rules, everyone follows the rules except the people that really don't want to follow the rules. And if you get a piece of artificially generated content that is really controversial, that changes people's opinions, there's going to be a huge incentive for people not to follow the rules.
That's right.
So I'm not sure that that would be effective, but it's a fascinating discussion. I've got a million other questions, but I'm out of time. So thanks again for a very fascinating hearing. We'll continue the discussion. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired, and seeing no further members wishing to ask questions, the chair asks unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list. Without objection, so ordered. The chair reminds members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record and ask the witnesses to respond to the questions promptly. Members should submit their questions by the close of business on November the 28th. Again, I also want to thank our witnesses again for being with us today. It's been very, very informative. It's very important that the committee and the subcommittee hear your testimony. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.